Ways and Means meeting. May the force be with you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America.
Thank you very much. Public participation. Is there someone for public participation? Please come up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Conti, Superintendent of Burlington Schools. I just wanted to take a minute to recognize Dr. Brad Jackson to my right. Brad has been an outstanding superintendent in Massachusetts for many years, 16 years in Holliston, and the final 4 of his career at Shawsheen Tech. Burlington students are very fortunate to have 2 exceptional high schools, in my opinion, to choose from, Shawsheen being one, Burlington High School being the other. It's been a hard 2.5 years. I just didn't want Brad, excuse my informality, Brad's work to go unrecognized by this committee. So this will be his last presentation, and he's been a fantastic partner for us to work with. We certainly look forward to working with the future superintendent, but again, Dr. Jackson will be missed in our area. So Brad, thank you for all your work.
Thank you. And with that, we'll tackle Shawsheen. Roger.
So thank you. The subcommittee didn't, process-wise, Rob and I went and talked to Brad about the Shawsheen budget, asked a couple of questions, but as it's an assessment, we don't add a lot of value to the numerous reviews that I've had with the Shawsheen School Committee and then each of the town's executive boards and everybody that reviews the budget. So I think I'll leave it to Dr. Jackson to tell us a little bit more about Shawsheen and tell us where the budget is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Eric. And just to clarify, I'm retiring, I'm not dying, so I will continue to contribute, hopefully in some way, in addition to being a supporter of all local public schools in this area. I think your subcommittee distributed a copy of a PowerPoint presentation that I would, if I could, just go through very briefly with you. I did want to share on the next slide that, as was mentioned, Shawsheen Valley Regional Vocational Technical School District is an independent entity, independent of our 5-member communities, which are Bedford, Billerica, Burlington, Tewksbury, and Wilmington. We are governed by a 10-member regional school committee, which has 2 members elected from each community. And in this community, Christine Kim and Mr. Kent Moffett are your elected members on the Shawsheen School Committee. And as I said, we are an independent entity, independent of all town and K-12 of our K-12 partners. As such, we are responsible for budgeting for and paying for 100% of the costs of the education of the students who attend. So, whereas in your budget, for example, the superintendent's office, my office, all employee benefits, health insurance, and Middlesex County retirement and OPEB and all of these things that you may see on a municipal side of your budget, Shawsheen pays for its own employees, all of those. We're also responsible for maintenance of the building. Again, some towns have building maintenance on the town side or the school side, so you may not be aware of that. And we are also responsible for the employer portion of our retiree benefits, much like you as a municipal entity are. So it's very important to recognize that difference, particularly if there are new members on the Ways and Means Committee, that we are a fully loaded cost that comes before you. As such, the school committee approves a budget, and then based on your enrollment on the previous October 1st, that budget is allotted to each member district in the form of an assessment, which is the number that you will see tonight and the number that you will ultimately, hopefully, vote to recommend tonight and will ultimately approve at town meeting on Monday. Our budget development process is a little simpler as a one-school district. We basically, on the next slide, we basically take our FY22 voted budget. We examine all of our fixed costs, both for increases and decreases. While zero-based budgeting is frankly more of a fantasy than it is a reality, I do insist that we look at every line item to ensure that, to make sure that temporary things, one-time expenditures are removed before we look at run rate expenses. And then I present something called a Strategic Improvement Initiative, which is essentially a new thing. And I present those separately so that information, so that my school committee and ultimately these committees can see that. And those, that more often than not is in the form of of either new staff or a new program or something, or an extension of a program. So on the next slide, I can tell you that this is the year of the fixed costs. Our budget is being driven almost exclusively by 5 major budget drivers. The first is our contractual obligations. All of our collective bargaining agreements are settled for next year. Next year is year 3 of a 3-year teacher's contract that has a 2.75% COLA in it. And it is the Shawshene School Committee's practice to budget, and excuse this feedback, to budget equivalent COLAs for their unaffiliated or non-union personnel. The quickest way to get more union activity is to treat your unaffiliated folks differently or less fairly than you do your union folks. So that is an idea that I support entirely. Those things alone are causing the budget to increase over $550,000. Our health insurance is going up, much like everybody else's. We fund our own health insurance, and we also, in our Middlesex County assessment, everyone who's not a teacher or a licensed educator is part of the Middlesex County retirement system, and as you've probably reviewed with your town manager, Middlesex County assessment is an assessment that you receive based on your participation in that program. Our contractual obligations in terms of student transportation have actually gone up quite significantly, almost over $200,000. This actually is our second year. This is the one that we just budgeted for. Year 1 was also up $200,000, and because we had we had accepted a bid for our transportation after our budget had been approved. We ended up making some reductions in our budget, in our current budget, in the FY22 budget, to pay for the increase this year. But next year, the full cost of that transportation will be included. As a regional school district, Shawshene is required by law to make yellow bus transportation available to every student who attends Shawshene Tech. That's why you see Shawshene Tech buses running through Burlington. That is different from a K-12 district that only has to legally provide transportation to students in grades K through 6 who live more than 2 miles away from their home. So because we're a regional school district, we have to make transportation available to all of our students. We also, and I'll show you in our assessment at the end of this presentation, we do also receive aid from the state in the form of transportation aid, which is why sometimes when you see in the MMA and in the Mass Association of School Superintendents in our advocacy work, we're always asking for to make sure that regional transportation is covered in state budgets. Our vocational supplies and materials are going up. You only have to go to Home Depot to see the cost of lumber, the cost of copper piping. Our supply budgets are really straining, and we have had to make some adjustments there so that we can make sure that all of our students receive a full and complete experience in their shops. We are, as an independent organization, responsible for building our own OPEB trust, and we are increasing our commitment to OPEB by $19,000 next year in accordance with our actuarial plan, which is available should anyone want to see it. Our athletics are going up by $17,000. That most of that is again in transportation. Because Shawshene is a large high school. We field an inordinate number of teams. Pretty much all of our major sports have freshman, junior varsity, and varsity level sports. So there is a lot of transportation involved. And all of our other increases are just $1 under $34,000. So that is actually all of the fixed costs increase in that one slide. On the next slide, I did want to highlight there is one new program, and a strategic improvement initiative, again, is a new program or personnel designed to improve instruction or improve the cost efficiency. On the next slide, you'll see that we are adding one teacher to our engineering and electronics shop. Back in school year 2021, we saw a lot of enrollment reductions in our electronics and engineering shop. And when a teacher retired, we chose not to fill that position, instead filling it with a paraprofessional. The remaining two teachers in that shop set about to revamp their curriculum to make it more connected to the engineering and to what's called mechatronics, which is basically a combination of robotics, engineering, and electronics, telecommunications, and systems and controls. So a lot of those robotics type of things. And our student interest has returned in with a vengeance. So this year, I recommended to the school committee, and they accepted that we return the third teacher to that shop, and as a counterbalance, reduce the paraprofessional that we once had there. So that's the only change year over year in our budget, is that one position we're adding, but also eliminating another. So if you go ahead 2 slides, the school committee voted a budget based on our beginning budget. Our approved budget from last year was $33,505. Add our fixed cost increase and that one recommended new initiative, that's our budget of $34,677, $784, which is an increase of 3.5%. We are just at the tail end of our budget season. 4 out of the 5 town meetings have already approved our assessment. Bill Ricker being the last one last night, so we just have Burlington on Monday night that will be asked to review their assessment. I will go over the assessment paperwork in a minute just to kind of walk you through it, particularly for those who may be new. But I did want to give you a kind of an update that we are seeing. So this is a chart that shows you the applications by community as of February 1st, which is our initial deadline for applications. As you can see, demand for vocational technical education is skyrocketing throughout our 5-town region, as well as throughout the state. We are, so as of February 1st, we had 494 applications for 340 seats. Burlington's we had 59 students apply this year, which is up probably almost by 10 students from this time last year. Actually, it's up almost 17 students from exactly 17 students from this time last year. Because we have a fixed size, we do create a waiting list. There's an admissions policy, and so 59 applications doesn't necessarily mean all 59 of those students will be accepted or will end up coming to Shawsheen. Sometimes many students apply to Shawsheen and then decide they're going to stay at their own high school or go on to private school or whatever. So these numbers are very fluid and remain that way until October 1st. So that's preview 1 of coming attractions. Preview 2 of coming attractions. That's not a slide. Don't panic. Don't panic, Steve. It's not another slide. I did want to, as a courtesy, inform this board that on last week the school committee voted to give me permission to submit a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for a comprehensive review of Shawsheen Tech, its physical plant, and its capacity. We are currently overcrowded, and we are a building that was built in 1970 that is starting to show its age. That is the first whole building statement of interest that Shawsheen has ever submitted. It is, and I have no idea what the outcome will be of that. High schools are hard to get. I submitted, I think, 4 in a row in Holliston and never got a nibble. And I know you folks are still kind of nipping at MSBA's heels about Burlington High School as well. So I did just want to let you know that was out there. Of course, our school committee will keep and the superintendent's office will keep all boards and committees informed should we receive any favorable interest from the MSBA. So with that, if I could take a moment to go over the assessment sheet.
Please.
I don't know if people have this, but I am going to ask if you could just pass that along. So in general, costs of your regional school district are distributed to member communities based on Mass General Law, Chapter 71, and your regional school agreement. And our regional agreement says that for capital projects, every member community must pay a minimum of 10%, regardless of your student enrollment. So I did want to, we do have a capital budget which is included in this number, in the number that I gave you originally, of $1,042,359. That is for new equipment and upgrades, and we need to replace the floor in the carpentry lab, in the carpentry shop, et cetera. Those are allocated 10% to Bedford, 10% to Burlington, and then the remaining $833,000, I'm in the capital budget assessment line, column, are allocated on a per pupil basis to the remaining communities. The remainder of the cost of our operations are essentially distributed on a per pupil basis based on the October 1st enrollment in Shawsheen. So if you look at the Burlington line in FY '22, you had 135 students attend Shawsheen. In FY '23, which would be October 1st, 2021. So those are the current students who are attending Shawsheen, or at least were on October 1st. You had 130. So the minimum contribution is a number provided by the state based on your community's ability to pay, your tax levy, your amount of real estate based. It's the same formula that's basically used to assess Chapter 70. And then the remaining amount is allocated by regional agreement. So your assessment this year is going to be $2,667,214, which is an increase of $74,149, or 2.9%. So when I met with your subcommittee, the first question they asked was the one that I'm sure is on all your minds too, is how the hell we're losing 5 students and our assessment's going up by 2.9%. So this next sheet explains that. The difference is that in FY '22, the Shawsheen School Committee voted to allocate $1 million of what is called excess and deficiency funds, and E&D funds are a regional school district's equivalent of free cash. And they allocated $1 million. They basically bled down our E&D account to reduce the member assessments to all 5 communities in FY '22. This was done with the full knowledge and support of the town managers at the time. The understanding was we were just getting into COVID, this was before all the ESSER funds had come out, and school districts, towns, all 5 K-12 districts in our region were all really working under a lot of uncertainty. So the region decided they were going to try to take that burden off. So what this chart shows, the second page that I passed out, is that if we hadn't done excess and deficiency last year, your assessment this year would be $28,000 smaller. So essentially, that is the reason it is larger is because we're working from a bigger denominator, $1 million bigger, in addition to 3.5% bigger because our budget went up 3.5%. So I wanted to share that information with you. That basically completes my presentation to this committee. I did want to again thank all of the 5-member school districts have been extremely collaborative with Shawsheen. We really, I think, have turned a corner in terms of relationships. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Eric and Tim Pavovar from Billerica and I and several of the other superintendents from the region are all somewhat personal friends and have been working together for many, many years, and have really tried very hard to turn the relationship around between our member districts and Shawsheen Tech, so that recognizing, as Eric said, that Burlington has 2 great high schools, and our 8th grade students, your 8th grade students, have 2 great choices to make. One is not better than the other, one is different than the other, but we are not in competition with each other for students. We want to give students equal opportunity to understand what their options are and give families that same opportunity. and let them choose which public high school they wish to attend. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, for questions from you and your committee.
Sure, thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that Shawsheen does. Every time I go there, I'm just amazed at the level of programs and the student engagement that's there. And I know some students who, struggled through middle school, but once they got to Shawsheen, they found their place and they were very happy. So I'm glad that both of those choices are available to our students. And with that, questions from the committee? Mike?
You mentioned on the MSBA that the building is showing its age. Like, what type of issues do you have with the school?
The issues are more basically in terms of the limited size, the number of classrooms we have, the fact that many of our shops are undersized, and that we have a sizable waiting list. Frankly, I kind of wrote this in our statement of interest. We are very proud of the maintenance and the upkeep that we do to Shawsheen. We have a lot of free and cheap labor. Our plumbing students, our electrical students, our carpentry students. We invest a lot of our resources, and we did a lot, particularly during COVID, when they couldn't go out and work in the community. So I would say the building is actually in extraordinarily good shape, but it is still it was built in 1970. And, at some point in time, these buildings and this type of this building gets an incredible amount of use. We have adult education, a very, very robust adult education program. We have workforce education grants that we do in the evening. But most importantly, we are just simply undersized. We have 1,300 students at Shawsheen Tech right now, and our auditorium has a capacity of 140 students. It was just a building that was built for a different time, sir, is really my message.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? David?
Just more, so I understand the assessments and again, how they work and each town has. So I just, does the assessment then change based upon the actual number of students that do actually go? You have applications, but as you said, they may not all be accepted. So is it a year behind, or is
It's a year behind.
A year behind?
So your assessment for next year is based on your enrollment this year on October 1st. So it's always a year behind. So if more students from Burlington attend Shawsheen Tech next year, then your assessment, your percentage of the FY24 budget would be higher. So it's always lags behind a year.
Go ahead.
And then I made some notes while you.
Sure.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
So it was very, very informative.
I appreciate it.
Health insurance costs were one of your driving factors.
Yes, sir.
What from a percentage standpoint?
6%.
6%? And the trust fund that holds it, how healthy is that? So you contribute, or I guess not you, the health insurance costs, so I'm thinking.
No.
So 6%. And OPEB, how are you doing your repayment? What's it based off of?
So we have an actuarial report and an actuarial audit based on our own employees, just like the town of Burlington does. We are, we are, as a regional school district, in my opinion, it's really important that we increase our contributions to OPEB. I think the town of Burlington will never go away, but, I would say the odds of Shawsheen Tech ever going away are also very small, but probably a little higher because we're an independent entity. It actually is about $40 million.
And then the plan as far as how much you're putting into the OPEB, is that based upon
It's based on our current, on that current $40 million, but we won't be fully funded for at least 25 years.
So 25 years.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Thank you. Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Thank you. Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
I don't see Phil here. Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob? John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Very much.
Good luck on Monday, everybody.
Good luck in your retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully I left some table scraps on the floor for you, Dr. Conti.
He's looking for a little more than table scraps, though.
He's humble.
Welcome, Dr. Conti. Nicole. Bob.
Yeah, probably.
So we'll start with the overall school budget.
Yes. This is going to be fun. So process-wise, the school has been reviewing the budget of the school committee meetings throughout March and April. Every meeting, they would take a piece of the budget, review it by departments. They would get input on additional requests for additional staff. The superintendent, the process started out with the superintendent assembling a budget with Nicole's help and probably a great deal of assistance. That included, at the end of the budget, you've probably seen it, 22 requests for new positions. Part of the process of reviewing the school committee was to figure out how to meet the guideline. There was strong commitment from the very beginning to hit the guideline, to meet the guideline. The question was how. A complicating, or not a complicating factor, a factor in the overall budget is the ongoing teachers' contract negotiations, and I'll let Dr. Conti talk to that in a minute. So the subcommittee, we reviewed it in piecemeal. Yesterday, last Tuesday, the school committee approved the budget at the guideline, 3.75%. And yesterday, the subcommittee received a description of how they were going to meet the guideline as reductions, some additions and reductions from the superintendent's budget. So I think, let's see, so that's the basic layout of it. It's coming out at the guideline. Dr. Conti, can I hand it over to you to give us an update on where we are and walk through the changes?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think first want to recognize all of the effort by the school subcommittee. I think they put in a lot of time. They were all presented, as many of you who have formerly served in the school subcommittee, with a 200-plus page document of detail. Normally at this time, we would have, as Mr. Riggs said, much more budget certainty. We're a salary-driven budget, as you all know, about 85%. The largest group of employees, the largest pool of salary is with our teachers. So without a settled contract for fiscal 23, there's some, I guess, ambiguity in the budget. I can say that my hope is that we will have a settled contract very soon, and that will then allow us to move forward with more certainty. We are committed, and the school committee did approve a budget at guideline, so we've kept to the guideline that we discussed in the fall. And so we can discuss where we've made some reductions. We can talk about potential new positions, but I would be reluctant to say these positions are locked in or anything like that until we have a settled teacher contract. Our intention is to settle the contract within the guideline that we've agreed to. Again, not all of that is within our control, but that is our intention, and our belief is that we can do that. So, so that's where we are. So just to get to the numbers right away, and then we can get to some of the reductions. The school committee approved a total budget of $59,539,128. And that's our operating, salaries, and expenses, and that is a 3.75% increase over fiscal '22. And then the school committee also adopted an accommodated account for our special education costs for out-of-district and for transportation at $12,873,799, which is an increase of 4.4% over last year. So as Mr. Riggs mentioned again, we had every cost center, so essentially when we put the budget together over the 8 to 12 weeks that the process occurs, the folks who are closest to our cost centers, our principals, typically program leaders, put together their needs. As Brad told you before, we look at sort of every expense and try to rebuild it. The former budget year does inform future budget years, but we don't just move stuff forward in the budget because we had it last year. Everything is considered, but there are some things that are obviously recurring. If we have consumables for our literacy curriculum, we're going to need those consumables again in the following year. So obviously there is some carryover, but not everything does get carried over. We ask principals to keep their supplies and materials costs at 0%, if at all possible, from fiscal '22 to fiscal '23. We can only do that so many years, but we wanted to make sure that we were, without a settled teacher contract, it was really hard for us, again, to provide anyone with a set number. We did ask people to consider staffing that they may need, and so that's when we get the additional staff that are in. And in prior years, we've said this for many years, we wouldn't bring those extra positions to this committee or even to the subcommittee, but the feedback that I got is it felt like there was too much agreement. So instead of me eliminating them before you see them, you all are seeing them, and then we're eliminating them after in order to meet guidelines. So, and I think that's helped with transparency. I also think it helps eliminate surprises. If any of you are surprised that the school committee is seeking elementary assistant principals, I would say then you haven't been participating for the last 4 or 5 years, because typically we'll put elementary assistant principals in and then they'll get taken out in order for us to meet guideline by the end of the process. One of these years, I hope that we will be able to keep them in, but again, the need, you're all seeing the sausage being made. So we had to reduce by about $470,000 the request that people had made. So so I just wanted to go through what some of those reductions were. And again, I think Nicole's done a great job trying to balance out some of those, but the vast majority of these reductions came in positions, obviously. So we reduced our athletic equipment expense budget by $34,000. We had some additional retirements, and that allowed us, we're not planning on backfilling, so that was about $100,000. We removed position request number 5, which was another associate principal for curriculum at the high school. We removed a part-time reading strategies teacher at the middle school. We removed the Fox Hill assistant principal request, and we removed the Fox Hill math specialist request. And so that sort of totaled around $470,000 given our estimates on those costs. And again, is it possible some of these positions may return? It is. Again, without a settled teacher contract, the there's not a whole lot of budget certainty. So again, we have another negotiating session tomorrow afternoon. I think the conversations have been very, again, productive. My hope is that we can settle tomorrow, right at the deadline before town meeting. Mr. Riggs and I can have a communication. We can probably tighten up some of our materials and be ready to present more budget certainty on Monday. But again, the school committee is committed to the guideline number that we agreed to in November or December. I forget exactly the date that we did that. And that is the budget that's in front of you today, being proposed by the school committee.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead, Roger.
One comment, the subcommittee did vote 5 in favor to support the budget.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Conti, so I see 4 positions were removed, and it notes up to 15 position requests. Does that mean there was 11 plus additions to new positions, or what was the new position adds?
Some of those positions have not been added yet. They may be still have a placeholder in the budget, but we haven't posted or hired those positions yet. Again, we're not going to move forward until we have a final number on what our salary commitment is going to be.
Okay.
So this model works, but again, could there be changes in it? Mr. Hardy, the answer is yes.
Okay.
This budget, again, Nicole, please correct me, also has some funding carried over from the ESSER 3 funding into fiscal '23 that we may be supporting some positions in that we won't have access to in fiscal '24. So we spread out our federal COVID dollars over 2 fiscal years.
Okay.
John?
Hi. Had a few questions. There is a fair number of grant-funded positions, and I'm wondering how sustainable that is. How likely is it that those grants will continue, or?
There's several types of grants, and again, please, I'm not being difficult, but there are our main grant that would fund positions is our 94-142 federal grant for special education, which is an entitlement grant. So that would be money that we would get every year. It's not a competitive grant. Those dollar amounts can change, but they've been relatively steady over time. So we do fund positions from those monies. If we
a lot of them were in that area.
Yeah, so if we apply for a competitive grant per se, and the grant funds for 2 years or 3 years, our assumption would be then that we may initiate a program using those grant dollars, but then we would need to incorporate those positions into the operating budget moving forward. So, and those would be competitive grants. We certainly wouldn't count on those competitive grant dollars every year moving forward.
Add a few if that's okay. For the contracts that you're negotiating now, I know that there was a short-term one at some point. Are you going for a full 3-year contract at this point, or?
We are going for a full 3-year contract. We did do a 1-year settlement in fiscal '21. We don't have a settled contract in fiscal '22, which is our current fiscal year. And again, we're obviously presenting you fiscal '23 at this time, but the contract proposal from the school committee is for fiscal '22, fiscal '23, and fiscal '24.
Right, so we'll already be into year 2 of 3 years once this is resolved.
Sadly, yes.
Okay, all right, nothing new. What's the enrollment assumption versus last year?
We're holding our enrollment, again, relatively steady. We have seen, again, some increases, but we are doing, the enrollment projection will be part of the town meeting packet that we'll put out, but we're not seeing a significant increase in enrollment everywhere. We're watching class sizes at some of the elementary schools carefully, but our choice has been to redistrict, so we're moving some families, which is never easy or a positive thing to do. So we're trying to rebalance our elementary schools to manage that with the staff that we currently have.
And how we've been with the new transportation company for a little bit. How's that working out relative to the old vendor?
Terribly, but I'm not sure it was the vendor's fault in particular. I think the last couple years have been a challenge in regards to transportation. I think that they had difficulty hiring drivers at the start of the year. So we didn't have, I think, a set number of, a steady number of drivers until several months in. So again, Bob does a great job managing it. I'm not criticizing anybody. We just couldn't find the drivers. The company said, we have buses, we just don't have people to drive the buses. And so I think that's where we were at. For fiscal '22, Nicole actually worked with a bunch of business managers in our area because I'm sure, as you all know, many of the bus companies are owned by one vendor. And they worked as business managers to negotiate a reduction in the contracted cost because for the spring of '20 and some of the fall of '21, we weren't transporting as many students as we normally would. In spring of '20, we weren't transporting any students. So I do think one of the reasons that there was a significant free cash return from the school district, transportation was one of those major contributors to the turnback of funds for that. This would be, next year would be our 4th year of 5 with the transportation contract, I believe.
I think we have 2 more years.
2 more years, so, and so we'll probably, not next year, but the year after, we'll be going through the process again of requesting transportation services.
Okay. And just final one, I have to ask this only because your name's on it. The one line item that stood out was the superintendent line item going up 23%. Are you adding new superintendent programs, or what's going on there?
I'm not sure what I'm adding.
So for those are joint school committee and superintendent, just central office expenses. So there was some training that we are implementing for next year, as well as a policy review for the school committee manual.
So that's what it is. We're paying the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to review our policy manual, and then they actually will house our policy manual digitally and update it so that it stays in one place and we get out of the paper age. So now I remember. Nothing, it's no other expenses for me.
It's not your slush fund. Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
No.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't ask this question earlier, but Pine Glen Memorial and Francis Wyman, did they have assistant principals?
Francis Wyman has the only assistant principal currently.
Okay. Yeah, because when you went through those, it's sad to see some of those positions leave, because especially the assistant principal role and associate principal role really is something that we could see a huge amount of value.
I'm not going to argue.
You could say that about most of the positions. Yeah. Any other questions? Megan?
The retirement, what position was it?
I'm not sure, is that public yet? I'm not sure it's been announced yet, so I'm sorry.
I understand.
But
Anything else?
Move to approve?
Second?
Great, thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 13-0. For the special education accommodated account.
Yes. So the special education accommodated account is up 4.1%. The number of students and the services being provided are essentially the same as previous year. There've been, I think, actually some slight reductions, but it's pretty stable. And not too much novel to say about it, so I'll just say the subcommittee voted 5 in favor to approve.
Thank you. Dr. Conti, would you like to add something to that?
I just want to thank the committee for the existence of this account just to begin with. I think it is an important account that allows us to prioritize some programming without really, as Paul would say, the accommodated account is for the most volatile parts of the town budget, and this is a very volatile part of the school budget. So having the accommodated account is something that we don't take for granted. As Mr. Riggs said, our numbers have stayed relatively steady. We have about 100 students. We are seeing the expansion of some programs because our kids are getting older, which is great, and that's what's happened. So you are all aware that we have a developmental skills classroom at the Pine Glen School, which is one of our district programs that is funded through the accommodated account. We have our first cohort of students who are going to be in middle school next year. So we are creating a developmental skills classroom at the middle school. We also have, there's a lab life skills. It's a medically fragile program that exists at Francis Wyman. And those students, again, are becoming middle school age, and we are also expanding the medically fragile program, the lab program, which is paid for out of the accommodated account, into the middle school as well. So again, I think it's time goes too quickly, but I remember these kids as 3-year-olds, and now they're going to middle school. So again, really appreciate the account. This account is built student by student. And the state has changed some of their the revenue associated with this account, and where I think 3 years ago, and I've lost a couple years of my life due to COVID, but the Student Opportunity Act that was passed applied some state reimbursement for out-of-district transportation, which was never part of the formula before. So they were phasing that in with 25% first year, 50%, and then 75%, and then they were going to allow circuit breaker to apply to transportation.
Yes, I think the current House budget actually has us going, meeting the 100% 1 year sooner.
So I think that's a good thing for us in terms of this account and getting reimbursed for some of the, we get reimbursed for some of the tuition costs we always have, but now to get reimbursed for some of the transportation costs is a good thing. And in some cases, the transportation costs are just as much as the tuition costs for the programming. So it is a significant support from the state.
Thanks. Roger.
I can just add one point about sort of an accounting item. So the state reimburses called the circuit breaker, and they do it on last year's numbers. And in previous budgets, 2 or 3 years ago, it was kind of unpredictable because we didn't know whether they were actually going to fund it. Nicole has arranged over the last couple of years to bridge the gap so that now we don't try to spend that money until we have it. And when it's received, it gets put in an account. And so the entire amount that shows up on the circuit breaker is the full amount that we received from the state last year. Right, Nicole?
The full amount we received for in this year,
In this
for
year,
last
for
year.
last year, right.
And we have 2 years to spend the funds once received.
And where it is, it can only be spent on this budget. So it always shows up in full. That can be applied.
Thank you. Questions? Right, John. 1 second, Sonia. I'll keep that in mind.
Just one question. So you mentioned the developmental skills program has progressed now that, the cohort's getting into middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So if they just started, does that imply that size will be expanding for the next couple of years as the pipeline fills up?
We know the students we have in elementary, so we are keeping track of how many students we could keep in the middle. The choice to attend the middle school is a collaborative choice between the family and the district, but we believe if we offer a high-quality program, most families want to keep their children in the community and in the schools. And so, Mr. Eiler, I hope I'm answering your question. We know that we'll have a population to fill that program moving forward.
Right, I'm just wondering if the population is expected to expand as those students get older, and is And I don't know, is there a similar program in the high school currently, or if not, is the expectation that we'll need that there also in a few years?
That would be the expectation in probably 2 to 3 years, yes. And the population is expanding. We'll have more students at the middle school in subsequent years.
Okay, so this was about $500,000 that went into this, so we can probably expect in a few years seeing a similar amount in the high school popping up, or?
And probably in 2 or 3 years. It's not necessarily going to be enrollment based, because there'll be some triggers, but we'll have a teacher and assistants with a small number of kids up to the maximum number that they can handle. If we need a second classroom, then you would see an expansion of that cost.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Megan? Oh, sorry. Megan?
Yes, thank you. I have a question about the special ed out-of-district transportation. In FY22, there were 3 monitors listed on that page, and they were removed. Has that situation changed the need for the monitors? Or I see the monitors listed for in-town transportation for a significant increase for the same number of monitors. So just wondering how that all balanced out.
Didn't they take over the hiring?
There may have been, those may have been monitors for students that aged out or graduated. I don't have that, the exact exchange of which students those were in front of me, but I could get that for you.
Okay, so are the monitors in the contracts that you have with Christensen and, okay,
Yes.
okay. But there is a need for in-town and transportation, so it's just not in the wrong categories, that's my question.
We'll have to check on that. Again, I think we shifted all of the monitors into the contracts of the transportation companies, so wherever the Christensen exists, they would have the monitors cost built in, I believe, because we are using monitors certainly for our, some of our transportation associated with special education.
Because there are 3 monitors listed for in-town transportation at $35,144, and last year it was 11,000? The same number.
Okay.
All set? Okay, so I have a motion to approve in a second.
Motion to approve?
Oh, I have it already.
Mr. Monaco looks like he's waving.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Monaco.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Eric. I want to go back just for a second on the program that started at Pine Glen for the special skills. So that was for all elementary students in the district who were in that Pine Glen program. Is that correct?
It's district-wide, Mr. Monaco.
Right. So, and now, as they age and roll the program up into the higher levels, in general, the program is overall will be holding more students. But my question is this: isn't it the case that many of these students, or at least some, if they weren't in this program, would they not be possibly out-of-district placements?
Again, yes, sir, that's a collaborative decision between the families and the district. But for this type of program, we often talk about cost avoidance. So we want to build the highest quality program with a sustainable population in district, and that is often more cost effective than sending the students out of district for a program.
Right, and that's the point I wanted to bring out, particularly from the point of view of John. We're expanding it, but we're expanding something that we think actually has a payback compared to not expanding it or not having it at all. So I think it's a win-win program, both from the point of view of cost, quality of education, and quality of life for those families.
Thanks, Frank.
So just further on that one is, it's the guidelines is the free and appropriate public education based on the least restrictive environment. So there's, as they're saying, between the community and the IEP team, but the appropriate thing is to be able to house and have a program that students can do within their community. Because we would like students to be able to access their community, their schools, their neighborhoods. And so it's also a state mandate that we have to be able to look at as well.
Thank you. If there's any further questions, there was a motion to approve in a second. So David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Gaia?
Yes.
Rob? Yes. John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 13-0.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the committee. And again, a special thank you to the subcommittee who spends 2 months going through this in detail. Mr. Eiler, I see you smiling. Is that because you're no longer on the subcommittee?
And not only that, but all the subcommittee or the school committee meetings that they attend.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
those are a large investment of time, so we do appreciate that. Thank you. So we'll start with the warrant articles.
Yes, sir, if that's okay.
Yep. Roger, 712.
So we switch out.
Do them in order.
Sure, we can do them in order. I ask other subcommittee members to take the lead on these. So each of them has 3. 7-12, I think I ask Ed to take the lead. Thanks.
Thank you. The Francis Wyman Playground, with which I am familiar, my children have played on. It's one of the, I believe it is the oldest such playground facility. There is rust and splinters to be found there. It's been installed for over 25 years, and much of the equipment was repurposed from Simon's Park, I believe, for that. It is due for replacement. There are 2 estimates provided, both in the same ballpark, about $350,000. The request is for $290,000, which includes a collaboration with the Park and Rec Department for some of the site prep and demolition, perhaps install. So that brings that facility up to the standard that we see in the other parks and schools. The committee voted 5-0 to support it.
Thank you. Bob, would you like, or Dr. Conti, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Again, thank you through the chair. And thank you, Ed, for the great representation of the warrant article. One thing I want to add is that the playground itself is on 2 different levels right now. We have an upper level close to the school, a lower level. We will be looking to remove the existing playground equipment, including some wood structures and sand structures that are in the upper level as well, too. So what's in front of you is a representation of what the playground committee from Francis Wyman put together, working with these vendors and the rec department, and we hope you support this. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Questions from the committee? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to remember, did we have a warrant article for Francis Wyman Playground a few years ago? Or was that a different school?
Memorial, we had a resurface of the structure at Memorial 2 years ago.
Okay.
But no, since I've been here, I have not put forth anything for Francis Wyman Playground.
And how old is the current playground there?
More than 25.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, that's 13-0. 713.
Again, thank you. The Computer Science for All curriculum, the backup you received showed an overall strategy. This would add hardware and software for implementing curriculum at the elementary school level. The request is for $150,000. In the summary we provided from our meeting of last evening, there's a summary of the equipment. It includes a package of Sphero robots, Osmo devices. These are entertaining and educational devices for the kids to program. It's a very good introduction to programming and coding. It is mentioned in the summary that there's some redundancy. There are about 40 Apple iPad products, and that amounts to about 17% of that budget total. Another 8% is for some common hardware items that we do have in district. The reason why it's there is I asked about it, and as about 25% of the budget, it actually pays for itself in the logistics of trying to install all the specific software licenses for these, for this curriculum. And it would be burdensome beyond the cost to use existing iPad hardware to move the software around for this package of hardware and software that's meant to serve a number of students that'll cycle in through the program. So overall, we approved 500.
Thanks. Would you like to add stuff?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. I really have nothing substantive to add. I did want to just take a step back for a minute because just to say that we worked very closely with with Paul and John, that we are coming in under the allotted amount for all of our combined warrant articles. So again, this was the dollar figure that we received from the town that we could allocate for capital projects. So I just wanted to start from that point. Mr. Parsons, again, did a great job explaining the computer science curriculum. The state has passed digital literacy computer science standards, and I think Burlington was actually implementing these standards ahead of the state's adoption of them. We're trying to incorporate more algorithmic thinking and computer science across all of our subject areas moving forward. So we started at the middle school. We're expanding our opportunities and programming at the high school, and we're, again, now going to be beginning some of that familiarity at the elementary school. So this is not a math or a science, even though it is applied in those areas. A lot of what's happening at the high school is actually in how to visualize data. So it can be done in the art department. There's a lot of work in the history department using computer science because of all of the influence that computer science, big data is having in regards to gerrymandering and other aspects of our civic life these days. So I don't want you to think this is just a technical skill. We have all types of artists, humanities students, and our scientists using and needing these skills as they move on. It really is a new literacy that our graduates need to have. So I appreciate the support of this warrant.
Thank you. Questions?
Second?
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 13-0. So Article 714.
HVAC controller upgrade at the middle school. The request is $108,000. This is to replace the centralized digital controls for the HVAC system. It was originally installed in 2004, was upgraded in 2011 with the renovation of the middle school. It's at end of life. That's determined by Trane that manufactures the systems that are installed. It is essential to the efficiency and the reliability of the systems. We don't have another option because we have to go with the equipment provider that's currently installed. As part of risk mitigation strategy, Trane takes care of repairs and upgrades through an ongoing contract, which they can no longer support unless we upgrade to their supported version of the controller system. The current equipment is no longer supported. So in my view, we're stuck. This is the only option to continue our risk mitigation strategy. So we voted 500 to approve this.
Dr. Conti or Bob?
Again, thank you, Ed, for that description. The only thing I did want to add is that No other equipment needs to be replaced. This is just for the computer server and the software itself that controls the equipment that we have. Thank you for the support. In previous years, we did replace 3 boilers at the middle school. So again, this software is not going to affect that. It's just an updated software and server system itself. All the VAV boxes, all of the thermostats and controls will remain and will function with the new system.
Across how many classrooms?
We have 108 teaching or learning spaces in the middle school.
Thanks. Doug?
So it's $108,000 for a 10-year lifespan. Is that the expected lifespan for this next one? I mean, is this 10 grand a year that we pay for?
Well, that would be 17, 18 years that the current
Oh, I thought
version's
this
been
was replaced,
installed.
I'm sorry, I thought you said this was replaced in 2011.
2004, and
That
it
was
was,
the- okay.
I'm not sure which parts were upgraded in 2011.
Yeah, so, sorry, through the chair. So 2004, the HVAC and this software was installed.
Okay.
2017, we got the soft end of life on this officially without the contract moving forward for next year. July 1 becomes our end of life on the software now. In 2011, the building was renovated, but HVAC systems were not renovated or upgraded.
Thank you.
And you said, oh, go ahead, Roger.
Just a quick question. It occurred to me that with new system, new software, is there any chance it will be more efficient or there'll be any energy savings as a result?
They do claim that it is more efficient, but again, you're limited obviously to the capacity and the users in the rooms. We do get to set some of those set points, and then it depends on how much we allow the end users to adjust those set points.
Thanks. There might be an upside, but
That was my question as well.
might be.
Hopefully there's operational efficiencies we can get a few dollars out of anyways. Any other questions? John?
I just wanted to follow up on what Doug was asking. Is there a specified lifetime for the replacement system?
Not certain on that, if they've given a lifetime on it. I know that this particular software is only 5 years old. Just so if we look at past history, I would say approximately 20 years out of it. But again, I can't confirm that definitively.
I mean, they sort of have us over a barrel, but seems like it should last longer, but okay.
Is there any sort of supply chain worries about acquiring this hardware?
It does say in the statement that they're approximately 4 months out.
Okay. So you're hoping that it would be installed sometime before the heating season starts?
Ideally, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 13-0. So now we move on to 7:15.
Rob, you're up.
It's for the Pine Glen bathroom repairs. It's a replacement of partitions, of 2 different kinds of partitions for 2 different kinds of bathrooms. And the partitions that are there are falling apart. So that's why the need for them. That's it.
The subcommittee vote?
400.
Thanks. Dr. Conti?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. The renovation of bathrooms shouldn't be new to this committee. We really try to make sure that we keep our bathrooms updated and clean. We feel like the students treat them better when they are well-kept and well-preserved. So again, this is for partitions. There is some contingency in case we need to replace some plumbing or a sink or a toilet. Going from, moving forward, I did get some questions from capital budget and some feedback after capital budget as to why we were spending any money at Pine Glen at all. And so, and in the Pine Glen repairs aren't necessarily part of our capital plan. The school committee did commit to a master plan of all the buildings in 2017. The high school renovation was a priority, as was Fox Hill. Obviously, the Fox Hill now is in the pipeline. The school committee has voted to maintain 4 elementary schools. And so the MSBA board just moved the Fox Hill project into the feasibility stage, I think about 2 weeks ago. So we really, there's not going to be a new Fox Hill for 5 or 6 years anyway. So Pine Glen is going to be a fully active elementary school. We're going to need to invest in that elementary school over those 4 or 5 years anyway. But the school committee, again, has voted to maintain 4 elementary schools. So we are operating as if we have to continue to keep Pine Glen functioning, and we're going to be investing over time in Pine Glen as we move forward. So again, the bathroom partitions are a small part of that. Obviously, the next warrant article is a larger part of that. So that's some of the context, and our 10-year capital plan is obviously being shaped by the MSBA's adoption of moving Fox Hill forward and the school committee's vote to maintain 4 elementary schools. So we'll probably have to make some adjustments in terms of Pine Glen projects to our capital plan.
And the cost of this was $39,767.
That was the estimate, I think, right?
That's the estimate, yeah.
But if I could just add something.
Sure.
No, so the total ask for the warrant is $65,000. I just want to make clear that there is a request for replacing some plumbing equipment as well. So it's not just the partitions. There's another estimate in there for approximately $17,280, and then the contingency above and beyond for retrofitting anything that needs wall or floor repair for either the partitions and/or plumbing fixtures, including toilets and sinks. So.
Thank you. Questions? David? Yeah, David.
Not this specifically, but just a big question I should know. When do you go out for competitive bids, or is this something that you just get a couple of bids on, or is there a dollar amount size that you have to go out for a formal RFP, or what is that?
I'll take a stab at it, but Nicole is right here. Officially, anything over 10,000, we need to seek multiple quotes on. Anything over 50,000, we need to go out for bid. There are options where vendors are on either a state bid list and/or cooperative purchasing program that would allow us to buy from them directly because either the state or the cooperative program has vetted them. That being said, services for plumbing, we have already gone out and we have a 3-year contract with a plumber, so we can use them without having to go out to bid for their services. And I think one of the quotes provided for the partitions in this particular warrant article request is from a state-approved vendor, and the dollar amount is lower than the 50,000 threshold, so that would be a requirement that would allow us to more easily purchase this materials.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chris?
Yep.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. 716.
Request is for $500,000 to build a new HVAC system for Pine Glen. It's a design and build for 25 spaces? 24 spaces. And it's right from the start. There is no air conditioning in Pine Glen, so it's hard to use in the warm months. That's what the proposal is for. It was voted 4-0-0.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. All I'd really like to add is, again, thank you for the wonderful description. We did a similar project over 2 years, 2 phases at Francis Wyman, where we kept the existing boiler systems and univents in the classrooms, but by adding the split units, it gave us the capabilities of providing cooling in the warm weather, but also heat in the warmer weather. It gives us a little bit of redundancy for the heat, but also a backup in the event of any failures, either in the classroom univent and/or boiler system. As Rob said, we are looking for approximately 24 spaces. We currently have 18 classrooms in use, but we have 24 spaces in Pine Glen. So the expectation is based on the pricing, if we're able to do it quickly and with vendors that can meet the demand and either bid or not bid, to do all 24 spaces, but, you know, given the supply chain right now, we'll have to look and see if we can accommodate that.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the backup. I'm not quite sure where the 500,000 is coming from. I see the 48,000 here, but I'm not seeing where the 500,000 number is.
So on the next page, page 25, I'm not sure if it's the same number for your material, but there's a cost breakdown of $16,500 per room for the split level unit and all materials and supplies to install it for 1 unit times 24,000 puts us at close to $440,000, and then there's $48,000 for engineering services from an outside company to design those specs for us to go out to the bid, and then for the engineers and/or builders to build to those specs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. 717.
Okay, this is $70,000 for a sports field master plan, which has never been attempted before. And if you've gone around the town, our sports fields are not in the greatest of shape. And it is something so that we can plan on what exactly we're going to do over the next 10 years. And the amount of money is comparable to what other towns have done. 0-0.
Thank you. Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a selfish warrant article on my part, so if I had to prioritize, I'd say the computer science was 1, this would be 2. I can't tell you, every year I get calls from different parent groups about needing to renovate a particular athletic field, or to mow a particular athletic field, or a particular venue needs to be updated. And I honestly don't know enough about it to answer them or prioritize them. They can be very expensive, as you can imagine. We work closely with Park and Rec and to make sure that everything is usable as soon as possible. Park and Rec is in support of this warrant article as well. What sort of I'm hoping for, what I asked Bob for, is just to take a pause, get a baseline on all of our athletic facilities, and then hopefully someone who knows this stuff can say, boy, your first priority needs to be a baseball field or a softball field or something, and then we can come back to you and do this in a more, I think, efficient way with someone who knows actually what they're doing. So again, not anyone's fault. I just think we need to take a time out. A lot of people use our facilities, and actually we use facilities that aren't even on school property. As you know, we use town parks. Our team swims at Shawsheen, so there are a bunch of facilities that we use that we are not even in control of, but we want to just make sure that we're looking at them holistically, and I just think it would make a more efficient use of how we can make upgrades, and because there is demand. As well as we don't only use school property, there's not only school teams that use these as well. Lots of youth programs use our facilities or these athletic facilities. And currently, the arrangement is we don't, there's no cost for them to use that. So I just think we need to have a plan that you all are aware of, the community can be aware of, and if, again, if people say we need a baseball field as an example, I'm not against a baseball field, but I just want to make sure that that's the priority and not just the loudest voice that's saying that's what we need. So this is a kind of something that I think would allow us to manage our facilities, our athletic facilities better.
Questions from the committee? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is going to cover all the sports fields in town, like the ones at the schools, the ones that the rec has, the one like Mary Cummings Park, there's some fields. It's going to look at all of those properties.
Yep, Marvin and Rotary and, yep.
And will that include like evaluating the quality of the field, like the condition of the grass, the levelness of the field? Is it going to get into like that type of thing and make recommendations?
So that is the expectation, that first and foremost, let's say it's a grass field, we'll look at the condition of the grass field, and they'll give us some recommendations on that. They may not go as deep as soil composition, but again, just visually. We also want to assess whether or not it's a recommendation or could benefit the town and the school department if these sites have more seating added to it, dugouts added to it, if there's any lights needed at these facilities, parking, things like that. So yeah, an overall assessment of the field, any deficiencies, where it excels, and where it's mediocre. So.
I used to spend a ton of time on the sports fields when my kids were in the programs, and you get to know the fields in Burlington pretty well, and you get to compare them to other towns, because you go into these other towns and you're playing soccer or whatever you're doing. And I used to come back to Burlington, and I used to feel like our fields just weren't that great. Like at Francis Wyman, you'd be having a practice, and then it'd be like, okay, let's do some stretching, and there's like just ants, like ant mounds all over the place, and the field's bone dry, and it's just, I just remember I just feeling like, you know, we could have been doing a better job. So I'm hoping that this will, if those fields are still in that condition, this will address those types of issues.
I hope so.
John? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since this is including a lot of the other fields, has the rec department collaborated with you on this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
They're supportive of this warrant, and I think by taking on the cost of the warrant under the school umbrella, then they don't have to do that. Again, I haven't talked to Brendan. I think we've traded phone calls, but I'm assuming he'll stand up at town meeting and support this with me.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second?
Just a quick question. How's the high school track / football field replacement? That was a warrant article approved a couple years ago, or at least a year ago?
Last year.
Yeah.
The bids came in, they were over the cost that we had assumed because of all of the things that we're talking about. I think Nicole is in conversations with the vendor, and we're going to be presenting the school committee with the solution, I hope, on Tuesday. So we believe we can solve the problem without going back to town meeting, but we're seeing costs fluctuate wildly as many of you might be in your professions as well.
Okay, thanks. So I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill? Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Gaia?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. 7-18.
Yeah, you're up.
Yes, okay, thank you. So 718 is Burlington High School music room floor reconstruction. The floor was done in 1972, and it is a stepped floor, the sunken floor with the steps, which are poured concrete, and in order to reconstruct and to bring the level up for more accessibility, this estimate is for $450,000. It was done by CBI Consulting, the architectural firm, sorry. And the committee voted 5-0-0 in favor for it.
Thank you. Dr. Conti?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, we've applied for a high school renovation to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. I think this year was our 11th attempt, so over the last 10 years. we're realizing that we may not be able to take on the high school renovation holistically. Obviously, the high school renovation is in our capital plan. This is an attempt for us to take a small bite of something that fit under the dollars that we had available in terms of moving our high school towards more accessibility. In the 70s, when the high school was built, they built the sort of a stadium-type classroom. The issue with the stadium-type classroom is not all students have access to the full depth of the classroom or the teaching area. So Bob can tell you more about the design or how it's going to get fixed, but some people, again, some feedback that we received is the music classroom was not in our 10-year capital plan. Again, the high school renovation is. If I could do the science labs for $450,000, that would be on this. We can't. That's going to be a much larger project, but you're going to see probably moving forward high school projects that we think that align with the future use of the high school. And again, accessibility is something that we're going to be looking at in many future years, probably in smaller pieces, because we have not been successful getting a large renovation project approved by the state. So that's sort of the genesis of this. This is 2 classrooms. This is the band room and the chorus room. Both are sort of those stadium classrooms that all students can access. And Bob, it's going to basically be they fill them in with cement, right?
Yeah, engineer the walls to make sure that they can support them, fill them in with cement, remove any electrical that would be below the grade of the cement, bring any electrical and heating up to, above the grade, and then finish the flooring either with carpet and or a mix of vinyl and carpet that we currently have right now. It does seem like a big project, yes, but the company that we're working with, the architectural firm, actually has done this twice in the past 2 years at local schools, one in Everett and one in Whittier. And again, so they're familiar with it. I don't want to say a lot of schools are moving to this, but I think addressing accessibility needs, schools are looking at ways to do it. In our feasibility study for the high school, it does recognize the deficiencies in both of those rooms and does offer solutions that are comparable to this or adding a ramp in both of those rooms as well too. So by doing this, it would check off 2 boxes that we would not have to look forward to in any future renovations in the high school if we were required to bring the building up to code.
And this includes both the design and the implementation, the construction of it?
Correct. There's some contingency built in there as well too, just because again, concrete and labor is a little bit volatile right now, but yes, the engineering and the materials and labor.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then Frank.
Yeah, I get, there's a few things that trouble me about this one, I guess. Obviously it's one of the bigger price tags. The first one is the backup's pretty shaky. It's just kind of like a letter saying, yeah, this number looks good. A little more detail for this amount of money would be pretty helpful, I think. I'm unclear exactly what it is they're doing. Without knowing what they're doing, it sounds like we're trying to make this ADA compliant, essentially. Is that, and why isn't that just a few ramps as opposed to, sounds like jackhammering up a bunch of concrete and moving everything around?
So again, the opposite, not looking to jackhammer up the existing, looking to fill in the void of the grade that's existing there. So right now we have step down tiers that are 3.5 feet wide. There's no access to this next tier, let alone the 3 or 4 tiers down or to the lower grade. We'd be looking to fill that in completely. So making it level with the top and making the whole entire, both classrooms, level.
So you're saying it would, instead of being tiered, it would just be flat?
Correct, from the top. So we would fill in from the bottom up.
So the ceiling would be a lot lower in the front now?
It would be the same height as the top tier already is. So right now we're stepping down below grade at the lowest point.
That's a lot of concrete.
Yep.
It's hard to believe that's the best approach. But
Well, another recommendation potentially would be to add a ramp, which takes away from the existing space that's available. Also, it takes away from the availability of space that's down below. I think a recommendation from the music director, I think filling in the floor provides a lot more flexibility in the classroom than just putting a ramp in.
Probably weight considerations for the material on that floor too, right? Because potentially you could have pianos and other heavy objects.
Sure.
I was thinking if you try to.
Isn't that on grade?
Second?
Isn't that on grade? That's not in the second story of anything, right?
It's not on the second story, so no, it is on grade. We did look at another option of potentially putting either a wood or a metal structure and then doing a subfloor. Obviously, we have to provide access below that. Then you get a hollow, bouncy floor sound, which is not great for the acoustics of a music room. The material and lifespan of that, is not necessarily the best. And then, like you said, with the weight of not necessarily the students on in there, but any pianos or larger equipment, it becomes a concern. So you definitely need to over-engineer it. Steel structures with obviously engineered beams, welded, bolted in place, it becomes relatively expensive on its own.
Okay, all right. I guess I'd like to see alternatives, but thank you.
Yeah, just one other comment about ramps. I think not only do they take up space, but I suspect the pitch exceeds ADA requirements, so they wouldn't meet ADA anyway.
Sure, okay.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only real question I have is, if the high school was being renovated, would these two rooms, not structurally, but from a floor plan point of view, would they most likely, if not definitely, remain band and music rooms in this location and in this size?
Again, if I were to look into a crystal ball being proximal to the theater, I would say that's where, and the other supplemental classrooms that are utilized by the music program, I wouldn't see moving these classrooms, Mr. Monaco.
Okay, and what about the size?
I'm sorry.
Square footage.
Size.
Square footage?
Are they big enough looking into the future?
Again, I think the classrooms are the size that they are. I don't think that we would, in a renovation, change we move the walls of too many classrooms in the high school. I just think we would need to re-equip them and re-outfit them. I think it'd be hard to move walls in the high school. Fox Hill walls are temporary. The high school walls are all
Poured concrete.
around poured concrete, yeah, so.
And through the chair, if I could just add, Frank, the rooms are two different sizes. So the band room is about 25% larger than the chorus room. So I think that accommodates the needs for the music department. Obviously, bringing larger equipment and musical instruments into the band room, that extra space is provided. The chorus room, again, is about just under 1,300 square feet. A typical classroom is 900 square feet. So these are larger spaces than typical. So I think that they would definitely meet the needs moving forward.
Okay, so, it's kind of a bizarre thing to do to fill 2/3 of the floor space in a room with concrete and raise it up, a foot, then 2 feet, then 3 feet, or something like that. But, when all is said and done, the volume of the room after it's been filled in is still a good space, then I'm not sure that there's really a much cheaper way to do it. So even though this seems a little crazy, I guess I do support it, and it sounds right, but it's odd. That's the way I look at it. So thank you.
Thank you. I voted to support this, so I apologize for revisiting it. I will say this is the one capital item that gave me pause, not because I think that it is, while I agree it's an odd solution, I think it's the solution for the purpose. I question the purpose, and that is because this is envisioned as a permanent solution to the accessibility issue and the modern design requirements for a music room as opposed to the 70s. But knowing that in looking to renovate the HVAC systems, we know that we're looking at something like $80 million just to bring everything up to code in order to accomplish that. I assume many other tens of millions of dollars of renovations will be contemplated. The renovation was what we thought was the right thing to do 10 years ago when we started on this process. We probably won't be able to get started on this for another 8 years or so. At this point, I think we really need to open up a spreadsheet and start doing some modeling so that we have a rational quantitative basis for deciding whether we should be spending on permanent solutions to renovate spaces like this, or rather choose planned obsolescence, because for the price tags we're looking at, it's not at all clear to me, based on some back of the envelope calculations, that we shouldn't be just planning on building a whole new high school. I know that it's going to give everyone a rash to think about 200 million or more on a new high school, but we're already looking at something like 100 million to afford ourselves some unspecified number of decades of increased life on the structure we have. So before I look at more expensive single renovation projects like this, I'd really like to see us build that model and plan for the future.
Thank you. Mike?
This is more of a process question, but for all the school warrant articles, there's no capital request form. Is that on purpose, omission? Did we say the schools don't need to fill these out?
I think it's historical. I wasn't paying close enough attention, and sort of the way it has been done for years. But
It's my fault as well. I should have reminded the committee that we had.
I don't want to blame
capital
Steve.
requests.
I was the one on the subcommittee, and
It would be helpful because this article, we have to look through like Gmail responses and try to figure out what the heck it is, and you can have a warrant article for $50,000 that's got 20 pages of backup, and then one for $2 million that has one page. It's kind of just, it's hard to absorb it quickly, what the purpose is and the intent and that type of thing.
And again, we'll present it however the committee would like us to present it. So if there's a form, Mr. Chair, we will happily utilize that form.
Yeah, I know Whitney has the form and she can provide it to you.
I sent it around to him.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was forwarded
I
earlier
respect
today,
it,
but
it's a little
again,
bit too
we're
late.
trying to make that conversion now, but obviously we're butting up against town.
Yeah, the feedback's been coming in from multiple places.
Okay, thank you.
Just one comment on the form. One of the benefits that Whitney built into it is that the fields all flow into their database of warrant articles and the things that they track. So they don't have to do it again.
Again, we'll happily do it. We're not resisting the form.
Okay.
And next year, we will make sure to find that the form is required.
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second?
David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia? Oh, she disappeared.
fell off, yeah.
Okay, Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
No.
And the chair votes aye, 11-1-0. Okay, 719.
So this is 719, it's possible for the roof repair, it's estimated $160,000. So the these roofs of this portable are leaking, and these portables they were bought used, and they were 8 years old at the time, and they've been in use for 15 years, so they will be at the end of their life. So though there is a plan to rebuild the faucet, it is still not going to happen until another next 4 or 5 years. And so it's necessary to get these roofs repaired. So with these roofs, there would be new, the HVAC units would be replaced, and all the electrical work and all that is covered in cement. The committee voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you.
Again,
Dr.
I don't
Conti?
have much to add. This is necessary to bridge the portables until we open up a new Fox Hill school. Someone asked at a prior meeting, can we get reutilize any of this money? Obviously, the roof we can't, but I think we need 2 or 3 HVAC units. Obviously, if we're using those for 2 or 3 years and they're still workable, we can reclaim those and use them again. But we need to invest some money in order to have these portables last until the new building comes online.
Questions from the committee?
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 12-0. 720.
Scoreboards for Space Field, estimate is $110K. This is adding 3 scoreboards at Marshall Simon Turf Field, Francis Wyman baseball field, and Marvin Field. The athletic department requested the scoreboards to allow the fields to be used for league play, and without the scoreboards, the Marshall Simon cannot be used for league play. It allows us flexibility in scheduling the fields. The recreation department activities and youth sports, such as core and baseball, will also benefit from this. The committee voted 4-0 with 1 for this. In favor.
Thank you. Dr. Conti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The scoreboards and the bleachers at the middle school were part of my motivation for asking for a master plan, because when they came to me and presented those things, the need came through the athletic department, which I think came through some of the parents groups and some of the sports teams in terms of use. But again, I wanted to see the athletic fields more holistically. So I think I have no doubt there's need for the bleachers at the middle school, because I hear that often from parents. I also know that we could move some varsity events to the middle school field, which is actually a very nice field, if we had a scoreboard to support them. So with what I'm being told is again, with bleachers, which is another warrant article, and the scoreboards, again, for the baseball, softball, and Marshall Simons Field, that those are improvements that sort of are needed immediately. And so that's why the scoreboards are on the warrant in front of you. We have been asked, can we get sponsors for the scoreboard, corporate sponsors? We have had this conversation when we redesigned Varsity Field, and I'm reviewing minutes from that. The school committee at the time did either establish a procedure for having someone put their name on the board, but the committee also conveyed that they weren't really encouraging us to go and have the athletic facilities commercialized and go out to have a whole lot of commercial sponsorship. Again, the school committee can answer that for themselves, but we did not look for corporate sponsors for these particular scoreboards. So I just want to be upfront with that. This would be the total cost for the scoreboards. Could we, after the fact, ask someone for a donation to put their name on it? I'm assuming if the school committee wanted us to, we could certainly do that. But we aren't going around looking for corporate sponsors. The warrant article doesn't include any corporate sponsors at this time. So again, I know that's going to be a question, so I just want to make sure I'm upfront about that.
Thank you. Chris?
So I was the one abstention, and I will be voting to support this. One of the reasons my abstained was I had a question on they can be used during the weekends, and how it can be controlled. Would somebody have to be there? Would we have to pay for somebody? There is the ability to use an electronic app. Obviously, it would be protected. Only a certain amount of people could use it, as long as there's an on-off switch. There are a number of varsity JV freshman teams that do already use the fields and don't have the equity of having scoreboards, and so that adds that level as well. So I definitely see that need. And the sponsorship was something that gave pause too. But really, when considering it, coming out of the pandemic and the amount of different companies that have already been tapped, one, there'd be a condition of not being able to potentially fund that through sponsorship, because somebody may not be able to do that considering all the other things that in town are different community partners are doing. And then the other question would come down, what then sponsor? What happens if it wants to be a Dunkin' Donuts versus something else? And so, those were just some of my considerations that just gave me pause to abstain. But in now reflecting on it, we'll be voting in favor of it.
Thank you. Mike?
I'm glad you brought up the sponsor, because I was going to ask about that. I have kind of like weird feelings about having sponsors on our sporting goods, our sporting facilities. And I know we did it at the high school, and yeah, I wasn't sure there was really a process the way that went down the first time. It sort of was, I think it was like an ad hoc kind of request. And if we do it, I think we should think about it and be deliberate and have a good process, but I guess maybe even think about if we want it at all.
I just remember, I'm dating myself, but the movie The Bad News Bears with Walter Matthau, probably too old for many people watching, but with the baseball team, what is it, the bail bonds sponsor? Anyway, so that's all I'm imagining is we'll have, the scoreboard from the bail bonds. Anyway.
That was on their uniforms or something.
Roger.
Just one other point. Well, we all know that the commercial sector in Burlington already funds more than half of the tax rolls. So they are making an adequate, very good contribution to all of the things that we do in town. And we really do appreciate it.
We certainly do. I did have a question about the quote, though. The quotes are dated back from 2021. So the question is the price tag that's here still going to be able to be met? Do you expect the boards to still be the same cost?
We did confirm that with the vendor, so yes, the vendor on this particular quote makes the scoreboards themselves, so they could confirm that. The labor is the only thing that is potentially, a variable for us. We do have an in-house electrician, and we do have a machine that potentially could dig the holes, and then in collaboration with the rec department, if we can do some of the site prep, I think that could alleviate some of the costs, but we don't know exactly until we go out to bid.
Understood. Thank you. Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just thought of this I'm assuming that these are, they're new, so they're very modern pieces of equipment. And I'm assuming that you can put any kind of signage you wanted on these boards, or is it a pre-formatted athletic event scoreboard all over? For example, can you put signage on it that said, we have a moment of silence or something? Can you use it for lots of things?
You're just straight up.
Roger.
So Frank, I think that's a good question, but I'd be concerned that the zoning bylaw would treat it as a sign, not as a scoreboard, and would be really annoyed if we tried to put general purpose messages on it.
I agree with that completely. It's just kind of a possibility as a safety thing, as a important public service thing during an event. I was just curious if it's an option when you buy this board that you have that capability or not, because I think it would be a very useful thing to buy at possibly very little extra cost because it's digital.
Bob?
Thank you, through the chair. So in the backup documents, the scoreboards that are representative of what we'd be looking to purchase do not include that additional field. It is an option to do that. So at our high school, when we purchased the scoreboard there is a lower scoreboard that's 12 inches tall, and then the full width of the scoreboard that we can program separately and have it run any words that we choose. But again, it's not quoted in these particular ones, so when we do go out to bid, it's something that we could consider as variables for the bids to include that extra scoreboard, if you want to say signage board.
Yeah, so how many scoreboards are we talking about here?
3.
All right, so I would be curious what the incremental cost is. Personally, I think it would be a worthwhile thing to have the ability, if it's not a major increase of cost. If it is, I'd forget it, but otherwise, I think I would prefer we acquire the capability.
Thanks, Frank. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's making the master plan look like a better idea every time we get into this. I was questioning it first, now I'm not. So with the bleachers, we're talking about putting $330K into the middle school, and and I realize there's a little bit of cart before the horse here, but what is our plan with the middle school that's justifying this big expansion?
Again, I think we could move more varsity events and competitions down to the middle school, so we would actually have spread out some of the use on both fields. From what I'm hearing, again, until we recarpet the varsity field at the high school, again, students like playing at the school, but as of today, if you speak to the athletes, they like the middle school surface better. I haven't played on either, and so, like I said, I'm way out of my area here. The issue with the middle school has been no scoreboard and no stands. And I think we have portable stands, and they get dragged all over the place. They've actually damaged the track. So I think it would be another varsity location for high school sports. I also have heard from many parents of younger students who use the facility on weekends, and they often complain that they don't have stands to sit in either. So I think there's lots of youth programs, and Mr. Hardy, I'm looking at you, that use that facility. So I think it would make this facility more usable. And again, I agree with you that it's sort of, we're asking for a master plan while sort of building as we go, but I think the master plan, from my perspective, was as a result of the conversations that I'm having about individual facilities.
So this field in particular seemed like the obvious one that would probably be first on the list anyway, is your thinking?
Yes, sir. That's what I got. But I was asking similar questions to you, and just wanted to have a holistic picture before we move forward. Because again, I'm learning a lot. I think with baseball dugouts, you need to have a fence now for protection. There's lots of things that are going on that we probably need to work with Park and Rec to invest in. I just want to do that from a planning perspective.
Okay, thank you.
So again, this was the first movement towards that.
I would just say, in support of this, although it's a large number, I don't think we're putting the cart before the horse at this field. It's in the field surface is in great shape. There's a good track there. And so it's kind of like something that we never did to finish a new field from several years ago. And it would help, I think, with utilization. And it's hard to see the tiny scoreboard all the way across the field if you're watching lacrosse.
You could buy a lot of binoculars for that
It's
price.
hard, I know. Just saying. I can't ever tell who's winning.
We do need more younger Ways and Means members.
It's fine.
To approve?
Thank you.
Second?
David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 12-0. 721.
All right, so this is for activity bus and utility vehicles. So it's for 2 activity buses and 2 utility vehicles. So these are Gators. The high school, the public schools currently have 1 activity bus, and they want to use these for sports. Special education will actually benefit from using these buses as well. And then the Gators, there's currently 1 that's over 10 years old. and they would like to have the 2 different gators be able to get to the multiple fields throughout the town. And we also did stress in our subcommittee that they need to be street worthy, but we voted 4-0 to approve.
Thank you.
Again, thank you. Just, I'm sorry, I probably explained that incorrectly. The district has no activity buses currently, so we're looking to purchase 2 14-passenger vans. We had a lot of transportation issues this year. I don't think we're fixing a problem that won't exist in the future. So the activity vans could be used for smaller teams, swim team, golf team, cross-country team. They don't require a CDL to be driven. Also, with some of our student programming during the day, we have programs where we take our students out into the community, and instead of teachers using their personal vehicles, having activity buses make sense. We've been actually needing to borrow. We've borrowed the lab vans for certain activities that we've had, and we can't run our schedules around when their vans are available. So we just like to have 2 14-passenger vans. They would need to sign them out. They would need to be program related, obviously, and the use of the vans would be controlled, but they would be used both during the day and after school for appropriate activities. The utility vehicles, I'll turn over to Bob.
I mean, utility vehicles, first and foremost, will be assigned and used for the maintenance department during the daytime. But again, we use them for larger sporting events and musical events, specifically at the high school. There's a large distance between the high school, obviously, and then varsity and or the practice field or student parking lot. And they're just moving equipment back and forth. We do have an existing gator right now, like I said, that is more than 10 years old. Again, and we consider, tires and batteries and whatnot into it while we do maintain it. Some things do have an end of life, and we think that this one would be replaced by a new one. Having a second one, again, we have 6 members of our maintenance department, and then, like I said, numerous athletics uses for them as well. So we think having a second one would be a 2-seater with a bed body on the backside of it, like a dump truck, and then the other one would be a 4-seater with that dump truck body on the back as well, too. So.
Questions? Roger.
A question I should ask the other day, this probably doesn't really matter. Are these 4-cycle engines or 2?
They're 4-cycle for the utility vehicles.
Okay. I've never heard of a van that had a 2-cycle engine in it, but anyway. Now, I guess, if we were being really climate conscious, we might say, can these be electric? But I think that's probably not practical.
Well, if I could just comment on that. Again, we haven't purchased them yet, so of course, depending on what is available, they do make the gators and or the vans in electric as well, so it is something that we will consider. It's definitely something that our school committee has asked that I would consider, so we will consider that moving forward. We will have to understand how we would charge those, so that's something that potentially could be positive, but also something that we would have to look into in the future as well.
Great, thanks.
Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are these for people to get from place to place, or is it to bring equipment from place to place, or is it like configurable, so sometimes you have seats in it, sometimes you don't? I'm not sure what it's being used for again.
If we're talking about specifically the utility vehicles, you buy them as they're configured. So if you buy a 2-seater, it's a 2-seater, and then you can choose what you want in the back of it. You can buy them without the dump body in the back. You can buy them strictly as 2-seaters. What's represented in the back of material is what we think is best interest to us. A 2-seater with the dump body in the back, and then a 4-seater with the dump body in the back would, again, give us the best flexibility for our needs.
A dump body in the back?
Yep, so it's an actual 4-foot bed, and then it has the ability to lift up and actually dump material out of it.
And you need that for like heavy equipment, that type of thing?
We use it from anything from, moving heavy equipment. We install concrete foundations. We've installed bike racks left and right throughout our buildings. Anytime we clean off the field, we can use it to pull the trailer behind us that has the cleaning, the brushes for the turf fields. And yeah, just generally moving large equipment. We have a trailer as well too that these would be capable of trailering from site to site, so we can move either athletic or music equipment, again, from the high school facility itself down to the fields with these, as opposed to, you know, larger personal cars.
It's kind of almost like a dump truck, like utility, but it's not the dump truck form, it sounds like.
Yeah, a
Or
larger.
pickup truck, maybe.
Smaller than a pickup truck, larger than an ATV four-wheeler.
Okay, all right.
And you can drive it on the grass.
Or the track, right?
It
The
could
football
be driven
field.
on the track, correct.
1 second. David?
But you can't drive them on the road, right? So these are kind of going to be stationed, you think, at the high school, and then if you need it to the middle school field, you need some sort of use, you'd have to trailer.
There is the initial, when you initially buy it, it does not come street ready, but there is the ability to make it street ready by purchasing blinker kits. So we could buy blinker kits for it, and then we would have to put a license plate on it, and we would be allowed to drive it locally, not on the highway. But as is, and again, we haven't purchased these yet, for the UTVs, we would not be looking to add the blinker kit and the license plate on them initially. So.
And then the vans themselves, Dr. Conti brought up, you know, like bring the golf team somewhere or whatever. So is the golf team currently using bus service?
Yes.
So there'd be some savings, or is that part of the bus contract that now they don't need to bring the bus, but now we've already paid for the bus and we're using vans?
I think if we needed to make an adjustment, we would do that. We were having trouble actually getting the buses on time to get the teams to where they needed to go. And then this year, we were even having trouble finding drivers to drive the team. So I think we had to cancel some of our competitions because we just couldn't get the students there. And then for some of them, students are then using their own cars or transporting each other, which, again, I think sometimes happens, but I don't like particularly much. So I think this would just give us some flexibility. These would be our vans, we would be driving them, they wouldn't be connected to the bus company at all. But instead of having a full school bus for a 10-person team, we wouldn't need that bus, and then we could take the team where we're going. I think the individual runs are charged for each team. Is that how it works, Nicole?
Yeah, there's an individual cost per bus and then driver wait times.
So then driver wait time, so we would save the individual bus costs and the driver wait time for the competition.
And then there's not specific drivers. These can be driven by anyone. So when they are signed out, maybe the golf coach, keep talking golf, but the coach or whoever would be the one assigned to that bus and ultimately then responsible for
Yes.
passengers.
Yes.
Insurance is, our insurance covers.
The town insurance would cover.
Or whoever the drivers are that we're allowing to drive those.
Uh-huh.
So do they have to be a town employee, or could a parent take it, or?
I think they would have to be employed as a coach for the team. I'm not sure, we'd have to ask the insurance company about whether a parent could do it. Please, no offense to our high school drivers, but certainly not one of them. But I'd have to ask about a parent. I think it would have to be an employee is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
And they would have blue tags. I'm assuming they would have state plates and.
You might need to work through a little policy to make sure that everybody understood the rules.
Yes, sir.
Frank?
I agree. It's more and more common schools are having these activity bans.
Mr. Monaco?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but back to electric vehicles. I have the sense that if the price difference between an electric and a traditional gasoline vehicle isn't putting us out of the ballpark, I would encourage us to go that route, and we may even be able to get grant money for a single charging station somewhere, around where these things would be garaged or parked at the school. Given that the life of this is going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 years, I really think actually starting to bring electric vehicles into the system makes a ton of sense, even if we have to pay for the charging station. But that may not be as expensive to get as we think. So I really will look into that.
Thank you. Doug?
I'm good. I'm good.
You're good. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out that Mr. Monaco is not a disinterested party since he has a wager on electric vehicles. It was just a driver situation. Obviously, there'd have to be a vetting program as to, what people's driving records are and so on. And has the issue of, working out, since everything's a negotiation, I'm assuming that the coach is now no longer just coaching, but also driving. That's yet another stipend or something. And it presumably has to be a negotiated situation. I didn't give him an idea they didn't have already.
I think possibly. I think honestly, our coaches sometimes get frustrated waiting for the buses because we utilize the same buses that are dropping off students, so they're finishing a drop-off run. So say a Francis Wyman bus then has to finish their run and get back to the high school to pick up a team. So I honestly think if the coaches had a vehicle available and it was more convenient, many of them are driving to the event anyway. I'm sure we'd have to talk about it because we have to talk about everything, which makes sense. But I think this is actually a win-win for and something the coaches are asking for.
Great.
Is what I believe.
Thank you.
Rob?
There are state grants for electric vehicles. We renewed the plan in 2020. It was easy to look up. And there's also federal incentives, $7,500 that everyone gets.
And somebody wins that.
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second?
David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob? John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 12-0. 7:22.
All right, so this one's for bleachers at Marshall Simons Middle School for $220. The bleachers themselves are for
That's it?
$220,000. Sorry.
Motion to approve.
$220,000. The bleachers themselves are $180,000, with the rest of it being the actual project cost to build them. Currently, there isn't bleachers there, and so the hope is for the freshmen, JV, and varsity sports that use them will be able to actually have bleachers, and the ones that they're looking at are ADA accessible.
Thank you. Dr. Conti or Bob?
Do you want to just talk about some of the specifics of the bleachers themselves?
Yeah, again, as Dr. Conti already mentioned, the bleachers themselves would provide a lot of flexibility to sporting events and events that happen on the field. Again, what's represented into the backup material, there are two quotes, and then each one of those two quotes provides a ramp or not. Again, this is something that we would have to go out to bid on, and then depending on if they're permanent or if they're movable, would require field prep below it. So these would not go on the turf, these would go on the grass area. If they were permanent, then we would look to have foundations built in order to support them. If they were what they call portable, again, these are heavy pieces of equipment. We're talking, multiple 1,000 pounds, but they still potentially could be moved either with a truck or a large tractor. Then we would either need a concrete pad or some type of pad that could support the weight of these and on a level field. So again, you're looking at approximately $180,000 for the larger of the two that's quoted here, and then field prep of $40,000, bringing the total to $220,000.
I believe there's a 10-year warranty.
Again, with what's quoted here, yes.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Roger?
I'm not seeing, how many people can sit in there?
If we go with the larger one, just about 550, and that's sitting shoulder to shoulder. If we go with the smaller one, it brings it down to just about 400. There's about half the size right now. If we go with the larger one, that's 62 feet. It's about half the size of the varsity field home side. That's just about 132, so it's a little bit less than half, but approximately half. The home side as well has 13 rows, so you're looking at a 13 row, and they do come in different widths depending on how wide you want the bench to be and how wide you want the rows to be in between. So the visitor side is a smaller section with smaller dimensions. So again, we have some thought process when we get into actually going out to bid, what's going to fit the fields the best.
And expected attendance.
Expected attendance, of course.
And
Try to value-wise the most for our money.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm picturing the field, and there's kind of a hill that comes from the parking down to the turf field. Is that going to need to be like dug out or anything, or is there enough room to put this in on? It doesn't seem to be particularly level to me.
So we would have to do some site prep, but not to the extent that I believe that you're discussing. We have a turf field, then we have the track, then there's an 8-foot concrete strip, and then we do have lighting poles that are in place. So between the concrete strip and the fence, down closer to Locust Street, it is more level as opposed to if we get up to the middle school. But the depth of these that were represented in the backup material are only about 35 feet in depth, depending on which one we look at. So we don't believe that grading or any issues with the actual grass is a problem. But again, we would need to either compact or create a base for the actual bleachers themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 12-0. Before we move on to the,
Can I just ask one, I recall, can I ask one more question?
sure.
So I remember when we were doing varsity field, there was this big thing about if you are putting in bleachers, you gotta put in all these kind of bathrooms and stuff. Are we running into that for this or not?
We potentially can, again, through the chair.
Sure.
So there's 2 ways to get around it, 3 technically, and I don't want to say get around it as in we don't want to put in bathrooms. If we build a permanent structure, the expectation is that we will put bathrooms. So if we have a plan in place, such as a master plan for the fields, that would satisfy, the state that we are looking at our fields and potentially would give us a waiver in order to not have to put bathrooms in. As I mentioned, they also make what's called portable bleachers that look the same but are able to be towed with large equipment. Those circumvent the need for them being permanent structures, which don't require bathrooms to be installed. By itself alone, you also can apply to the state by asking them, I have money to put bleachers in, but a bathhouse and/or field house would maybe double or triple my cost and may not be in the budget, and the state may allow a waiver for that as well too. So again, there's some options that we would look at.
Okay, great, thanks.
Before we move on to our last warrant article, I can't help but notice that the annual community use of the schools warrant article is missing, and I'm just wondering what happened to that.
I'll speak to it, but during COVID, we did not use the building as much as we have in previous years, which left us with funds available in the existing revolving accounts. So this year, we're not looking to ask for that money, but we do believe in next year or future years, we will ask for it again.
Okay, so there is money still available for those specific groups to use the facilities. That use hasn't disappeared, we're just using the money that we've allocated previously but haven't spent.
Correct.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Thank you. 724.
23.
Yes, 723.
This is the visitor access control system. So this is throughout all 6 physical campuses, but does apply to both administration and preschool. So this is a printable pass ID for anyone visitor coming in. You can take a picture. There'll be a nice little sticker you can put on. You can either use your license, take a picture. It also controls people coming in and leaving. It documents them coming in and going out, and also can flag if somebody who's trying to come in should not. It's actually a 3-year contract, and on the 4th year, the school will be incorporating it into their operating budget.
Thank you. Dr. Conti or Bob?
Again, I think Chris did a great job explaining it. I think this is something where the schools are a little bit past due on, and we should have A lot of schools around us right now, even companies have a visible system when you sign in as opposed to just writing your name on a pass. So what this would do is exactly as Chris mentioned, provide us with the equipment at all of our buildings, and then the licensing moving forward for the next 3 years to support that. If you look in the back of material, you'll see that the company offers additional modules that we could upgrade to, which could include anything such as like late passes or scheduling. Currently, we're not looking at that. We're looking at strictly just the access control. This does not replace human beings. You still would have to be buzzed into the building. Once you're in the building, you would be at the main office and/or front desk of, let's say, like the school committee office. Then from there, you would interact with a vestibule or a piece of equipment that could then take your picture. If you're a frequent visitor, then every single time you wouldn't have to re-enter your ID. We could look you up, or you could look yourself up, press print, and then we would have to buzz you or allow you into the rest of the building. So it's really the visible ID, and then just you wearing a badge that's stating and printed today that it's you and showing your picture.
We voted 4-0 to approve.
Thank you. Questions, Roger?
Just a demo. So when Rob and I went to Shawsheen, they have such a system as a kiosk. You put your driver's license under it, it tells you who you are, takes your picture. They print the badges in the office, so you still have to get the badge from a person. And then when you check out, scan it again and you're out. So it was very convenient. I think it'll be a good addition.
Yeah, I do remember that system from Shawsheen. I'm very glad to be reminded of who I am because as I age, I keep forgetting. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you obviously will be locked into this system once we get it. Is there any kind of guarantee in terms of the pricing going forward after year 3 that it will quadruple or something?
I do not have that in writing that there's a guarantee for pricing on year 4.
Okay, so it seems like, given that we will be locked into it and won't be able to live without the annual fee, it would be good to get some kind of guarantee on a maximum increase or whatever, just so it doesn't skyrocket all of a sudden.
Roger.
I'm not sure I'd use the word locked in. You could certainly replace it for the similar amount of money.
Yes.
I would suspect that if there's any lock-in, it's that you get so used to the convenience.
We'll have a lot of sunk cost on it, I should say.
It's it's like a streaming service. You just keep paying and you enjoy it. Move to approve?
Second.
Oh, sorry.
Doug?
What if you don't have an ID or a license or?
Take a picture.
You can take,
You take a picture.
you can take a picture at the kiosk itself.
Okay.
You probably have to talk to a person.
So then you don't get a background check, you just get a picture.
Well, this isn't a background check per se. I mean, they're checking your license and pulling data from that.
Well, it
but
does
it's not
say
gonna-
background check
It
on
does say
it.
background check.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
On the quote, it says there's a background check.
I know Shawsheen
That's
does
an
the background
upcharge.
check.
I thought that was the upcharge.
Oh, we're not getting that
Yeah.
necessarily, okay.
So what we're getting is just an ID with our picture on
Mhm.
it. And they can take it off your license, or if you don't have a license, it takes your picture and prints it.
Correct.
But it always takes your picture. Does not take the picture off the license.
Yeah.
What does the license do?
License has your name on it.
Tracks information, and so you're tracking the people who are coming and going. And so if there's any divorce orders or somebody that shouldn't be in the building, can flag that as well. And I think the big upsell is from paper and pencil to actually something that is physically together across the school district. And so the same thing could be tracked from, the preschool straight to the high school for somebody who's trying to get in.
Is it just a license? Can you use your passport?
So I spoke with the vendor of this. I want to say that safely, we could not accept a license, but also there's a benefit to accepting a picture ID for us and for the students, right? So if we were to accept that, then we actually know who you are. There's the security of the server itself, obviously for protecting that data, and it's definitely not something that we want to store, but the capability is there. There's also some up services that we can link into, available databases, let's say a police department and so forth, and we could have the police monitor as well. Now, we're not there, we're not looking for that. So again, if we see frequent flyers that are coming in, we can manually enter and then take a picture. We can take a photo ID and then we can scan that. We could take a passport and scan it. We could take a school ID, scan it. So there are multiple options of how we can actually, collect that data. But ultimately, what we want to do is know who's coming in the building and verify that that person's real. And then if we have our own database of users that we don't want on the properties, then we can go in and put those as well as flags. So then if somebody was to register in that system as a user that we don't want trespassing, then that could flag us as well too, to not allow the system to print their picture. So the capabilities are really there to expand, but right now we're really looking at the capabilities easily by just saying picture, name, date, and get away from the paper process of writing visitor on a white sticker and saying, yes, go into our building.
That's fine. I mean, I have no idea, but it seems like if somebody was going to come in with divorce orders or anything else, they're just going to say, I don't have my ID and my name's Joe, and somebody's going to take their picture and go, here, Joe, welcome, enjoy your, I'm not sure we're accomplishing a whole lot, but
Yeah, so that's still flagged. So within any school database management system, there's some type of an icon and within the inside of it. So if that name, as they just said, was then put in, because you could manually put in, that you weren't allowed into the public schools when you tried to come in and say your name. The only way it gets around it would be if somebody gave them a false name, but.
I would think that might happen.
That could happen.
Yeah, seems like.
Mike, Bob?
Well, I don't want to extend this conversation too deeply because I think there's multiple uses for it. I think for after school is going to be a different scenario where we probably would not be looking to do that as frequently, if at all, in the beginning. But during the daytime, I think there's less reasons why a person would be visiting the school in the first place. And I think we would weed that out just as to what their request is as to why they're coming here. There's limited times throughout the day when parents need to be in the building, and if they do, whether or not they need to actually get into any curricular or classroom hallways. So I think your concern definitely would be is if somebody was to lie, well, why is Joe Smith coming into our building for what reason, right? If Joe Smith had a meeting with the principal, then obviously there's a real reason for that. And if Joe Smith had a divorce situation, then we would have different concerns over that. But typically, like I said, we want to get away from the ability of somebody being able to easily lie and really put an effort into showing us a form of ID.
Roger and then Mike.
Just a real quick one. So like any security system, it will keep honest people honest. The other thing that might be useful in the database is Corey's, the Corey checks for people that the police department does. I don't know if that could be directly tied in or uploaded or something, but that might be an interesting attribute of a person.
Mike.
Oh, thanks. So I'm assuming, but please confirm, this data will be logged and it will be stored for a certain amount of time when people come and go?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Bob, is the 25 grand for 3 years, right?
Yes.
The 25 grand is for 12 kiosk stations that are capable of scanning, printing, and then obviously storing data on that, which would then go to a back end. And then 3 years of service, and then the initial rolls of printer ribbon and or label for stickers. We will have to maintain printer ribbons and labels and stickers moving forward, but 3 years of software license. At fourth year, we will have to decide if we love the system enough to keep it, and then, whether or not we choose to pay for 1, 2, or 3 years moving forward.
Again, please, I don't want to oversimplify this, but we're having people sign in now, and this is just, we're trying something new for $8 grand a year for 3 years, so.
With you.
So that's,
Yeah.
we'll see if it works and if we can expand it, and we're hoping it'll add some security to, we'll at least have pictures of people moving forward.
New source of yearbook photos, I see.
Maybe we can do that.
Your source of bad yearbook photos.
They're always bad, but that's all right. Any other question? Thank you.
Second.
Okay. David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and chair votes aye. That's 12-0. Roger.
I just want to thank the school subcommittee members for digging into these issues and all the time they've spent in the school committee meetings, and the budgets.
I'd like to thank them and the school subcommittee chair as well for all the time spent. And I'd also like to thank him for the delegation of the warrant articles amongst the different members. I think that worked out well this year. You're so good. And thank you to the school committee and to Dr. Conti and Mr. Kuna and Nicole.
Chairwoman Bond is here with us this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Bond.
Better bond.
What's that?
The better bond.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where Brad is tonight, but that's okay.
Just that bail bond thing?
Before we wrap up, there's two still articles we need to go through, Essex and Minuteman. There were more assessments than articles, but
Yeah, we should just vote them, so. So this is an area that we continue to get, so Yaya was in communication with Essex and got some very detailed numbers. By the time the budget book has gone out, there's already been a number put in the book for both Essex and for Minuteman. They are higher than.
thank you, guys.
So there's no real issue there. But Yaya, can you just say what the details of what's going on at Essex?
Okay, so at Essex, the current enrollment at Essex is we have 4 students there, 1 in 12th grade and 3 in 11th grade. And they received 2 applications within the time limit of applying to the school, and 2 are waitlisted because they got the admissions the applications later after the date was closed. The 2 students did not get the admission. The 2 students who are waitlisted may get admission, but that will be decided after May 15. And so total currently we have only 4 students, at 1 in 12th grade and 3 in 10th. And the tuition fee per student this year is $18,766. So that translates to $75,064 for the 4 students. The transportation estimate is $1,750 per student, and for 4 students, it is $7,000. And so the total estimate for these 4 students for the year 2023 is $82,064. Those are the numbers I got from this last
Right.
And these are all assessments.
These
We
are all
have no-
assessments,
We
right.
have no control over these costs.
Right. Yeah, the rates are set by the state. They're not actually set by the state until late in April, so the data comes in late.
Right.
For Essex, the number that's in the budget book is $106,865. I don't see any point in moving a different number, just it would cause some confusion potentially, so.
That makes sense. So I have a motion to move. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Mr. Chairman, how is this funded?
This is raise and appropriate.
This is in the operating budget. It's it's raise and appropriate. It's on,
So we can't amend it on the floor if in fact we get a different number, because it could be a $30,000 difference here.
yes, though as Yaya mentioned, there's a potential that 2 students might get accepted, and then we'd not have authorized enough money.
Yeah, okay, I vote yes.
Thank you. We've talked about this in the past, like the number is relatively small enough that it would go back to free cash if we didn't spend it all, but if we needed to reallocate it, then we'll do a warrant article later in the year to capture the rest. Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Sonia? Oh, sorry. Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
If I may just give more information on that, if both 2 students get admitted, that the cost will be about $36,000. So it will be a little bit over the estimate we have right now. but I think that would be okay. So if they don't get admissions, then we are very proud of that. And I vote yes for it.
Great, thank you. Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 12-0. And now we move to Minuteman.
So in Minuteman, the assessment is for $26,314. I believe we just have one student at Minuteman, and they are not accepting any new students from Burlington.
Okay.
Their new tech high school is so successful, they don't have room for anybody else.
Awesome.
So a motion for the amount that's printed in the warrant.
Second.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank? Yes. Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill? Sorry, Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 12-0. And that,
Just one question, it doesn't matter, but the reason they're going to Minuteman and not Shawshene must be a program issue?
yeah.
It's programmatic.
You have to go to Shawshene if they offer the program. You don't have the choice to go.
And same with Essex.
Mike?
Just kind of a question on the overall warrants. So at some time in the planning process, we allocate a certain amount of money for warrants, and we say the town and the school usually split that amount, right? What was the amount that we?
This year it was about
Like
4.5.
I thought it was 4.8.
4.8.
Yeah, something like that.
That seems like a lot compared to other years.
It is.
It is more, yes. So we talked about that as part of the Town Hall 1 subcommittee. That, again, there were some things that were deferred because of COVID. We pared it back the last few years. But it's always been in the low 4 million, high 3.
Yeah, 3.5.
Always.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
always.
I thought it was,
But-
it used to be
but I'll say
religiously
agree.
2.5 million,
Okay.
split 1.25 each.
That's kind of what I remember.
Yeah, so it is significantly higher.
But we've also been, the amount of free cash has been growing almost to the point where there's too much free cash. We have collected residents' property taxes, and we have not expended it. You want to be using the money tax money that you collect for the benefit of the community. But as Town Hall 1 has pointed out, we also have we're rolling a lot of it forward because we expect to need it.
So what do you think next year we'd be putting forward?
It's a very good question. I'm going to say similar or a little less would be my gut, but.
It also depends a lot too on whether the hotels come back strongly or not, right? Because that's where we've had a major dip. I mean, we've seen restaurants come back. It's the hotels now that are sort of lagging.
Okay, interesting, yep.
Thanks. Just one comment. So I observed, and Dr. Conti did as well, that all of the items that they had on their wish list fit within the number.
Right, that's
To me,
what we
that's
say.
that's not really a good situation.
No.
I think you want a little bit of pressure on projects
Oh.
from the finance side. I don't want to encourage them to just come up with new projects because somebody thought it was cool.
Oh, you mean there was nothing that didn't make the list, is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Right. So,
Nothing that didn't make the list.
Correct.
They're full, they got everything they wanted from Santa Claus?
Everything they were ready to propose, they got.
so there's only one warrant article we haven't voted on, and that was 119 South Bedford Street. I think the Housing Commission voted it down 5-1, and so the selectmen are still meeting Monday night. I think the plan is, their goal would be to potentially see it withdrawn, so if that's the case, we wouldn't need to have a meeting on Wednesday night at 6:30, but I will schedule one, or 7 o'clock, I will schedule one just in case, so that way I've got my open meeting laws, covered. But unless you hear from me, this would conclude.
This would be right before town meeting.
This would be right before town meeting, and there's logistical challenges, because I know some people want to probably be hybrid, and where would we have this meeting and all that good stuff. Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just back to the free cash for a split second.
I just want to point out that in the deliberations of the administration, David and I recommended that we pull out $1 billion of expense by putting nothing in stabilization and no incremental money into OPEB. And the whole idea here is honestly, use the free cash to get things built or bought that we know we need. Hold back as much as we can, and let's see where we come out in the debt schedule. There's a lot of financing coming up for the next 2 or 3 years, and I think we're going to find out that free cash is going to get used up pretty readily once we get into that. It's going to take a while.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to thank everybody on the committee for all their hard work this year. It's been fantastic, and we'll see you on town meeting next week.
Frank?
Frank, you have another, you didn't raise your hand's still raised.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I forgot.
I didn't lower it this time, so I had assumed you were quiet.
I thought he had the last motion, but if he's not going to, move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.